So you are a journalist and you were a White House correspondent. How was that for you?
It was definitely a dream come true. By far, my biggest accomplishment career-wise, professionally. I mean, I was in rooms with Donald Trump, with the Obamas, with Jeff Bezos, the most powerful people in the world. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, President of Latin America. Looking back now, in hindsight, I understand I actually had like a mental breakdown. I thought I had COVID and it was actually a panic attack. And I ended up hospitalized in March 2020. It was all due to burnout. From the stress and from covering all those stories. I had turned off my emotions. So I was desensitized and I didn't even know I was desensitized. The only thing that would get me to feel something was if the next story was worse than the previous one. That kind of initiated my path on trusting my intuition, trusting my heart. So how do I now allow myself to feel everything that I've lived and seen and witnessed through a self-regulated nervous system?
Welcome to The Way of the Heart. Today's episode is with Emiliana Molina Fajardo. She is a former White House correspondent. There were many interesting experiences that she shared with us during this episode. And today she is the host of the Awakened Journalist, as well as the Conscious Journalism for the Good of Humankind podcast. I loved every second of this conversation, and I really hope that you do as well. Before we dive into the questions that I would love to talk to you about, I want to share something with you about what this conversation means to me. So for a while, I had been thinking about doing the podcast in this format with video and with a set that I was proud about and that I felt comfortable in. And in the transition that I've been, so I closed my company that I had for 7 years and I closed it last year, officially sold everything in January. But for over a year now, I can even go back to 2020 when I first started my other podcast. I've been thinking about this style of podcasting, sitting with someone in person and having a conversation and really connecting. And again, with this beautiful set that I feel supported with. And there was a lot of resistance internally, fears, doubt, all of the things that come up with transitions and with changes. And my intuition mainly talks to me through images. And there's an image that has come to me over and over again, and it's you and I having a conversation.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew, it's moving
beautiful.
Every cell of my body. I'm getting emotional because I know that is the way that my heart knew that was a symbol that was very clear to me that it equaled podcast, right? Like that symbol to me equaled create the podcast, because I've followed your journey for a little while and there's a lot of similarities, right? A lot of things that you have changed and you have been transitioning in. So for a while now, I've been like, I want to have a conversation with her in the podcast. I want to share this conversation with the world because I know that through the ups and downs that we have both gone through, there's going to be a lot of gifts for people. So this conversation, it's the tangible manifestation of me following my heart, taking action on it, and going through the very uncomfortable feelings, sensations, emotions that comes with. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh my gosh, Nati, thank you for sharing that story. That makes my heart ecstatic and joy to hear that. To hear that your intuition showed you the very clear image of the both of us doing this podcast together and that you followed the way of the heart. I know it's not easy. But we're both here sitting together doing this interview. So we're definitely following the way of the heart. And I feel honored that you share this story with me, and that this was one of the signs for you of following your intuition, trusting that, and growing into a different version of Nati. So thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful.
Definitely growing into a new version of myself. So to put this podcast together, I followed a class that I'm taking online by a podcaster. You may be familiar with his podcast, Know Thyself. Mm-hmm. So you will love that podcast. Okay. So he has a class to teach us how to create our own podcast. And he formulates a question that just resonates with me so much. The way that I heard him say it was, what version of myself is going to have to come online for this new chapter of my life? And I love the formulation of that question, because it implies that it's in me already and it needs to come out of me. And to me, that is connecting with the heart, is really listening to the heart and like, what is it that has to come out? What is it that I need to embody to really bring in this new chapter? So definitely a new version of me is having to come into these conversations and really reprogram a lot of the things that were running the show before.
And I'm so proud of you for being here and sitting in this chair, because with my career, I have met so many people that say they want to start a podcast, they want to do a podcast, and they spend years talking about it and not taking action. And it gets to a point where you get tired of hearing them because they're not materializing that dream. And I love people that actually take action and do what they say they're going to do. So very proud for being here, of you for being here and being on this chair. It takes a lot of courage to allow that new version of Nati to be seen and to be heard in this new way. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it definitely took a while. Like I said, even if I really go back, it was in 2020 when I felt that there was something in podcasting, there was something in having conversations with people that really pulled me. And it took 4 years. So if you're out there, you can still do it. You can still make it happen. But it's definitely being courageous and following the heart. And we'll dive deep into the questions that I have for you, but I think this just naturally came out. Following the heart, it's not going to be, rainbows and flowers and poppies. It's going to be difficult. It's actually following our heart, the path that is going to be that is going to stretch us the most, because there's the most growth in there. And before I started the podcast and officially I was like, okay, I'm going all in. I had all of these different projects because I'm very creative. So I was creating art and I'm writing and I'm doing all these things. And I was like, well, what out of all of these options that I have in front of me is the one that scares me the most? And it was definitely the podcast. So I was like, damn it. Okay, so I guess I really have to go all in into this one. So here we are.
I love that. And that's the beauty of the way of the heart too, that people get to see this on screen, but they don't realize that it took you 4 years to actually sit down on this chair and do it. So yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and it's never too late. You can start at any moment, but just know that having your thoughts, words, and actions align is so powerful. And taking action on those dreams, not just talking about it. Do it. Just do it. Nike tells us how to do it. Just do it, and do it now. Don't wait anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of courage. But yeah, that's why we're here in this planet, learning and growing and really experiencing ourselves through every single thing that we do. So let's start with the questions that I have for you, because you have a very interesting journey and you have done really interesting things and have been in positions and places that are very interesting. Interesting is the key word.
Yeah.
So you are a journalist and you were a White House correspondent.
Correct.
That's very unique, especially for the years I think that you were doing that, like very, very important years in the timeline that we're in. Before we actually talk about that journey and what that meant to you and how you felt and all of that, let's talk about a little bit about how you got there. Did you always want to be a journalist?
So I remember when I was little, I used to watch the news and I used to think to myself like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool to be there. Like I always knew I wanted to be on TV. I used to think I was going to be a model and a singer, and I think once I made it to college, I started going into the bachelor's of communications and the science of communications. But I was like, I can't. Well, actually, technically, I went into psychology first. And then 6 months down the line, I quit and moved on to communications because I was like, I don't see myself in a room listening to people's problems all day. I do love sharing people's stories, but I was like, I can't stay still in a room. And so I shifted to communications. And walking around college one day, I actually stumbled upon OWL TV, which was the student-run television show. And I saw the on-air sign and I was like, what is this? This is really cool. And I saw them broadcasting and doing the news show. And then I was like, that's what I want to do. So I kind of figured it out. As a little girl, I always kind of knew, but I really figured it out in college. And I got into OWL TV. I started as an assistant working the front desk. And then I quickly moved up to reporter and then news director of the FAU ran students TV station. And that was a lot of fun. And I think that's kind of what kickstarted my career. And then I started looking into the best colleges to study broadcast journalism in the United States, and that was Northwestern University. So I applied, and back then one of my mentors told me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Maybe you should apply to other colleges as well because you're applying to the best school in the nation. And I was like, no, I'm set on this one. And if I don't get in, I'll just keep applying until I get in. This is the one I want. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about your intuition. It's like trusting the way of the heart. When you know you want something and you set your eyes on it, you eventually will get it. And I got in on the first try, and Northwestern definitely opened up a lot of doors for me in journalism. And that's one of the ways in how I ended up in Washington, D.C., becoming a White House correspondent as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, I feel like, out of many of the fields that you could be in, being in front of a camera, I mean, we are here in front of a camera, but like an actual broadcasting, the whole country is watching, that is courageous. I mean, that's amazing to be using your voice in this way. So
it was nerve-wracking too. I got to tell you, my first live shot in the White House, the first day I walked in, I was able to contain myself on air. But as soon as we went off air, my photographer turned off the camera and he said, we're out, cleared. I was like, oh my God, I'm shaking. I can't believe I did that. Like, holy crap, it's a dream come true. But like, I was also processing and digesting that experience because it's only about 1% of humanity who make it into those spaces. And so to be there in front of that camera and be working in that way and sharing my voice, how you mentioned, in what I believe to be true back then, is a huge deal. Now I have a different level of consciousness. So we're sharing our voice in a different way.
And this is exactly the journey that you've been in, right? So how was that time working, doing that and being in the White House in Washington, D.C.? How was that for you?
It was definitely a dream come true. By far my biggest accomplishment career-wise, professionally. I mean, I was in rooms with Donald Trump, with the Obamas, with Jeff Bezos, the most powerful people in the world. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, presidents of Latin America. You name it. I was in those rooms covering it and witnessing history firsthand. So it was a lot of responsibility. It was a lot of joy. It was a lot of excitement. At the same time, it was also a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And pressure to not make any mistakes on camera, because that could mean you losing your job or getting canceled, or the whole world witnessing you make a mistake, and that could feel very embarrassing. And I did make mistakes on camera, very embarrassing ones. I'll side note, once on television, we had an audience of like more than 200,000 people when I was working for Univision, and I was covering a blizzard, and my tongue froze in front of the camera live on air. And so I couldn't speak. Like, my tongue just froze. I was like, oh my God, toss back to the studio because I can't speak. Like,
oh my goodness.
So my photographer had to be like, Emiliana, like, her tongue's frozen, like, toss back to the studio. That was really embarrassing, but thank God my news director was super understanding back then. It was a big blizzard.
Not much you can do with that.
Exactly. So that was interesting. And, once I was able to get past the shame and the embarrassment, like, I had a good laugh about it. I also got to cover the transition between Obama and Trump in 2016. So that was chaotic. I was able to witness firsthand. I was in the streets of Washington where protesters were setting limousines and vehicles on fire. They were trespassing stores, vandalizing local entrepreneurships and local businesses. It was scary and also exhilarating, which is interesting, and I think that's what kept me going a lot of the time as a journalist. It's like you don't realize the danger that you're putting yourself in sometimes to cover a story. And that was me. I used to be fearless. I used to be what I thought was courageous because I used to chase the story, and I used to get in front of the chaos and speak about it live on air. And looking back now, in hindsight, I understand making that huge transition that it started for me in 2020 as well. I actually had like a mental breakdown. I thought I had COVID, and it was actually a panic attack. And I ended up hospitalized in March 2020 because I couldn't breathe. I just had huge anxiety and panic attacks, and it was all due to burnout from the stress and from covering all those stories. And that kind of initiated my path on trusting my intuition, trusting my heart, learning to move differently, operate in a different way, communicate in a different way. And I realize now that actually, and I spoke about this with a psychologist that I had back then, I had turned off my emotions. So I was desensitized, and I didn't even know I was desensitized. The only thing that would get me to feel something was if the next story was worse than the previous one. So I would feel a lot of emotions, mainly, in school shootings or at funerals, covering homicides or covering some kind of violence. It was like just very tragic stories, one after the next. And at one point, my psychologist actually asked me, like, do you want to turn your emotions back on? And I sighed because I knew, I guess internally, my soul kind of knew what that meant, even though my human was digesting it. And it's like, okay, you've been living the past few years pretty desensitized because what you were covering was extremely traumatic, and you were witnessing the worst and the best of humanity all at the same time. So how do I now allow myself to feel everything that I've lived and seen and witnessed through a self-regulated nervous system, and learning tools to regulate my emotions, my nervous system, and to, be able to hold myself in very difficult situations. That I would say has been one of my biggest, if not my biggest, I guess, emotional, personal accomplishments. So professionally, yes, making it to the White House. Personally, learning to self-regulate my nervous system and put myself in positions where I can work feeling a lot of safety as opposed to putting myself in danger.
And also detaching completely from your emotions, which are really guiding messengers.
Exactly.
So when you had that conversation, I assume you were like, well, okay, whether you liked it or not,
yeah.
somehow you started that journey. And you still kept working as a news anchor, right? Or at that point, yeah.
For like a good 9 months after that, after the collapse in the hospital, I ended up working a good like 8 more months in the news industry, and then I was like, that's enough. I think my mission is complete here. It's time to move on to something else.
So how did you know that it was time to make that change?
I was also going through a very difficult personal situation at that point. I was going through a divorce with my ex-husband, and I was making a lot of mistakes on air. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made on air was I said something about firefighters in California going door knocking and sharing with residents, what their safety procedures was, et cetera, et cetera. And that wasn't the case. Like, firefighters didn't go door knocking, So the city official who was in charge of communications at that point, it's called PIO, the Public Information Officer, reached out to my news director and was like, hey, this is wrong. Like, you got to recover this story because we don't do that. And he sent out an email and said, guys who made this mistake on air. And I took full accountability for it. I said, that was me, I apologize. And that's when I realized, okay, I've gone through a lot professionally. I'm going through a lot personally and emotionally. I just can't handle it anymore. And so much so that it's making me make very difficult mistakes on air. And that was kind of like the cherry on top for me to say, that's enough. I gotta remove myself from this because I'm not okay. And that was an inner battle with my ego of like, then wow, who is Emiliana if I'm not a White House correspondent any longer? Who's Emiliana if I'm not a news anchor any longer? My whole identity was shredded to pieces. And I had to humbly and lovingly pick myself back up and rebrand and discover a new version of myself in the way of the heart.
So how did the transition and the change start? What was the first thing that you started doing? Like, how did you even figure out what next? Because at least for me, that was so difficult. Like, I know I don't want to do this, but what next? Because I have no idea. And I do like a lot of things, but I don't know. I don't know exactly. And like I shared at the beginning, there were certain things that I knew my intuition was really showing me, but it also took a lot of work for me to get to a point that I understood that was my intuition. So how is that process for you?
And learning to trust your intuition can be so challenging at first because we're so conditioned to work for someone else, to do what somebody else tells us to do. And for once, it's like, no, sit with yourself, pause, and try to figure out what you want, right? So the beautiful thing about life is that it first shows us what we don't want and what doesn't work for us, so that then we can move into and shift into, all right, what do I want? What makes me feel joy? What makes me feel alive? And I remember very clearly that I began to meditate. I didn't know how to meditate back then. So I would start for 2 minutes and I was like, this is so annoying. This is so difficult. This is so challenging. Like, all the thoughts in my head, like going blah, 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 blah. But I started, and eventually I ended up getting to a state where I could just sit and meditate for 4 hours. Oh. And I would be delighted and feeling so much joy and pleasure in doing that. And in one of the meditations, I got the very clear message, like, start your own podcast, and it's going to be The Awakened Journalist and Media Healers. And I was like, interesting. Okay, what is this? And so Media Healers became a project that I did 4 seasons on, interviewing more than 40 journalists on their personal experience in the news industry and sharing their stories. That was something that had never been done before, and kind of doing the call to action of how can we improve the news industry. But that came to me in meditation. And The Awakened Journalist is conscious journalism for the good of humankind. So that's where I allow myself to have a little bit more fun, more joy. It's a little bit more relaxed. It doesn't feel as constricted or uptight as Media Healers. Because obviously, you're talking about the news industry and it feels like you gotta add a more professional touch to that. Whereas conscious journalism for the good of humankind, I believe is based more on the way of the heart. And how can I support the empowerment of humankind and the awakening of a deeper level of truth and consciousness when humans listen to my voice or hear my stories and my personal journey. So it really was sitting in meditation and listening to myself and learning to understand, like, oh, that's my intuition. My intuition speaks to me a lot through words and like very concise messages. And that's how I kind of started. And actually today I'm at a space where I feel like it's time for rebranding again. You know, as you change through life, your professional projects also transform with you, and that's okay.
That was something that was difficult for me to accept. Being okay with changing my profession, even when I had created the business that I was working with. That to me was very difficult to accept. I thought there was something clearly wrong with me, or that I was never going to be satisfied with anything in life, because how could I be unhappy with something that I created myself? Like, that to me was like so difficult. It took so long to realize that no, it's okay. It's okay. You grow. Your interest grows with everything that you're doing. And something that I heard recently that was so clear and simple to really express how I felt was the difference between passion and purpose. Because passion is something that you do for basically for yourself, right? It's something that really lifts you up and makes you happy and it brings joy. Purpose always includes others. It always includes other people. And to me, that was like, oh, that's exactly how I felt. I always felt like, yeah, I even love what I was doing, but it never felt purposefully. What's the right word to say that? Yeah, like it never felt like it was, I was actually fulfilling my purpose, because it felt like I was not helping anyone. And I was always would give all of these justifications of, no, but you are helping people and people are having beautiful moments because of the invitations that you're creating and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that is also, there's a degree of truth in that. But the difference between the passion and the purpose and changing and the growth and how that reflects into what we bring to the world is 100%. I agree with that 100%. And it's challenging to navigate in a world that is so structured and that is so centered in like profit and, like things have to be in a certain way or things are supposed to last, even with relationships, right? Like I'm sure that was another thing that you had to learn. We have this idea of things being very permanent when really things are so impermanent.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, even nature, we have 4 seasons. We have the moon, the sun, and we're constantly going through the day, through the night, like the light and the darkness. So it's if we don't change and evolve and we don't grow, we stay stagnant. And that becomes more difficult to sustain and more painful than the pain of changing on its own. Like when your pain becomes too unbearable, you have no other option but to change and evolve. And it's the natural cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if you want to go there right now, but where are you feeling like life is pulling you to rebrand?
Oh my gosh, yeah, definitely on the podcast. So I stopped media healers and I was like, okay, I feel like this is enough. It was very challenging to do that podcast. A lot of journalists were very afraid to speak to me at first. And so they would say, no, I don't want to be banned from the news industry. I don't want to speak up on this, so it was a challenge. And it was facing a lot of fears on, my own internal fears of being canceled or being, what's the word I'm thinking right now? The news industry is a very powerful industry. So there's a lot of fear that journalists feel when it comes to speaking up about how it operates from the inside, and I was trying to expose that, but it came with a lot of challenges. So I stopped that after 4 seasons. And the Awakened Journalist, I've been trying to figure out if I should change the name or if I should rebrand that. A new name hasn't really come to me, but I ended up opening up an LLC called Joyful Media LLC, just because I think, part of my mission is, what does the world need more of? And I feel like we need more joy. So how, my intention is usually, how can I bring more joy to the world through the stories that I share? And sometimes that means getting really vulnerable on camera, but also laughing about it, because laughter is a natural transmutation of that pain. It's like, all right, you feel it, and then you just let it go with your laugh. So it's also teaching, I guess, humans to enjoy the process and enjoy the way of life or whatever they're going through in the moment, knowing that it's temporary and that it'll pass. And if you just allow yourself to go through the stages feeling the most joy you can possibly handle, then that's great. And laughing at yourself, like, that's okay too. So that's where I'm at right now. I don't know if I'm going to change the name. And I haven't felt like a new name has come in. So I'm also kind of shifting into more public speaking, doing more interviews like this one, emceeing events, and possibly creating retreats as well. So we'll see where that takes me. But yeah, I'm figuring it out.
That stage is definitely both really exciting, and some days are like, what is happening? I need a ground. I need someone to tell me that they know what I'm supposed to do.
Exactly.
But it's mainly really exciting. So I really hope that, I don't have to hope. I know that you will be guided in the most magical way to really bring to life and to bring to others what the world needs the most through you while having joy.
Thank you.
So going back really quick to, what's the name of the other one? The Media
Healers.
Media Healers. What was the most difficult thing that you had to go through with the journalists? What is that fear? What is it that it's so hard to, expose?
I think for me, and I remember this very particular moment, I was getting a lot of no's from journalists to interview them, and they didn't want to share their stories. And I was sitting outside in my backyard meditating. I mean, it's like, I didn't want to give this much detail, but my heart is telling me, like, share all the details. And I'm like, no, please, no, please, no. And my heart's like, yes, please do it. So I oftentimes, and this is a very radical thing that I do, but it works for me. It doesn't have to work for you guys. Just take what works for you, and what doesn't, disregard. But I am very much a wild woman at heart. So I connect deeply with nature, and I do that through grounding. So walking barefoot on the ground, and sometimes dancing outside of my backyard when nobody's watching, completely naked.
Okay. So love that.
This is literally what I was doing. I was outside in my backyard, naked, meditating and dancing and crying. Just crying because I felt like I was collapsing. Like, I just was getting so many no's, so many obstacles. And I was like, God, I'm here and I'm trying to do the work, but like, help me out, because I don't know what else to do. It was kind of one of those very vulnerable moments of deep surrender and like, what the fuck? Like, help me out, please, because I don't know. And when you have those humbling moments, the answers come. And it is so, so groundbreaking, because I was sitting there and I was like, all right, what is it? And what came to me is, get past your fear of death and get past your fear of persecution. So being persecuted as a journalist, which I have been, by the way, and it is extremely scary. But I worked through that internally. And once I was able to work through that internally, something lit up in my head and said, like, death doesn't really exist, right? Like, we are energy first before we are this human body. So if you can look death in the face and say, thank you, I'm actually dying every day of my life when I go to sleep because I'm rebirthing in the morning, right? Like I'm rising with the sun. It's a new version of me. It's a new opportunity for me to be a different version of myself or a better version of myself. And that's why a lot of yogis, I think, call it like grand rising. It's like you go to sleep and that's like, it's like a way of dying, a way of resting. And I was able to get past those fears, and it was like an energetic block was released. And I started getting journalists that were courageous enough to be like, you know what? I'm a White House correspondent, but I need to speak on this. And yes, I'm probably going to get backlash and I might get fired, but like, I feel like I need to do this. And I started encountering those very courageous journalists. And I think one of these fears, and it's very valid, is obviously because a lot of journalists are persecuted and a lot of journalists are killed for speaking truth and exposing difficult situations. And I think that was definitely one of the biggest challenges that I faced, was getting past that and getting past that fear. And today I'm in a place where I have full understanding that I have encountered very dangerous situations. And every time I'm in a lot of danger, I just feel my angels and I feel like God shows up for me, and I'm so protected because I've had opportunities where I've had like near death experiences, and God is just kind of like, nope, we need you here. So you're going to stay here for a long time, so keep working on your mission. And it's like, okay, I'm here for it. So
there's so much I want to unpack there.
I know that was deep. We went really deep. I'm mainly concerned about like sharing my meditation practices naked in my backyard.
I think that was the best one. And fun. And that really reflects the joy that you want to bring, like just being free.
Yeah. And it's like we're talking about two very different things and one very difficult situation, but one of the ways in which I work through those very difficult situations. Right. And like, that's how I bring joy into my life in a lot of this darkness. And that works for me, so again, like take whatever works for you, but that brings a lot of joy to my life.
Yeah. But just try it.
Try it. Be wild. It is so liberating. I promise you.
I know. And I think it's very important to just have this very, very clear understanding that the fear of death, I mean, we all have it.
We all have it.
Have it. We're mammals.
Yes.
Every cell of our body has been programmed to survive. Survival drives our bodies and our brains, really, in so many levels, which is why it's so important to have this type of practices that connect us with something that is more than the body, that reminds us that we are more than just the body, that there's a spiritual realm that we cannot see.
Yeah.
But if we really get still and silent enough, we can really tap into it, which is why I think meditation is such an amazing tool and practice to really get close to that and to feel what it feels to be supported by something that is more than just the body. Because when we are out of the practice, when we are out of meditation, anything that is not basically vibrating in that frequency that we get to feel through the body, that is supporting, it's supporting our life, then we know that there's no resonance, right? There's something off with like whatever is happening in my life that doesn't feel like what it feels to be supported by, my spiritual side.
Yeah.
But it's the fear of death is just like,
it's real.
It's so real.
We all have it.
It's so real, and it allows us to also have the other side, right? Without that, we wouldn't have like this incredible deep feelings of love and just grace and all of these other beautiful emotions that we get to experience as human beings, and like those two extremes, because we are like these two extremes.
And I think it comes down to, Nati, also to add to your point, like asking yourself the right questions. It's like, instead of asking yourself, well, what if I die? What if living my purpose causes me to die in some way? Why don't you ask yourself, like, and what if I live? And what if I live in joy? And what if I live feeling absolutely fulfilled because I'm living on purpose and living the way of the heart? So it's shifting that mentality and shifting to ask yourself the right questions of like, what if I allow more joy into my physical and emotional body? What are the possibilities of that, you know? And asking yourself the right questions.
Yeah, I think that the fear is always going to be there, but it's really finding something that kind of like feels that it kind of like lets us forget a little bit about that fear, and we find the excitement, we find the other side of that color, right?
Exactly.
We find the contrast to that, and then we go after that, and hopefully it allows us to feel alive, because ultimately, if we are not feeling alive every single day, so then what's the point of fearing death?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So you mentioned that in these moments that you have really faced death. And I don't know if maybe to add to this question, you would feel comfortable sharing any of those experiences that you've had. But you did mention this connection with your angels, connection with, you know, the spirit world.
Yeah.
How is that? What is that relationship? What are angels to you? And yeah, for listeners that maybe don't have that vocabulary or they don't even know what that means, what is that to you?
Okay, I love that. So 3 points to your question.
Yeah, sorry, I made it a little complicated.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I love it. And I love diving into these topics. The first one I'm going to say is, I just had deja vu. So I was just looking at you, asking me this question, and this is a vision that I had in 2020. So when I was getting ready to quit the news industry and I was really scared and I didn't know what to do or how to do it, and I was afraid of how I was going to live and survive and pay for food and shelter, I feel like my angels showed me a lot of visions of my future and what that looked like. And this was one of them in 2020. And it was like, what I understood in that moment was they were giving me the strength and the courage to actually quit because they were showing me a path forward. So that's one thing. The second thing, and I'll talk about my fear of death and persecution first before I dive into the angels, because my angels played a crucial role in supporting me through that process. I was sharing a story at one point, investigating a story of child abuse. And it was a 5-year-old. I won't get into the details of it, but it was a 5-year-old who had cerebral palsy. She was being sexually abused. And I had all the documents proving that from doctors, where it said alleged sexual abuse or suspected sexual abuse. And it was very graphic in the details of what the symptoms were for this child. And as I was investigating the story, police officers found out, and one of them in particular sent a message to my colleague and was like, tell Emiliana that if she continues investigating this, we're going to sue her for defamation. So I took that as a threat. So because I was covering that story, I got threats from a police officer in particular who, I guess for some reason, did not want me uncovering this story. And it ended up, my news director spoke to the lawyers at that news station back then, and they said, you don't have a case, you don't have a story, we can't move forward with this. And I felt completely devastated and completely defeated, because I was like, how are you going to tell me I don't have a case when I have all the documents corroborating what the mother is saying and alleging? So that was one situation. It was very scary to feel like I was getting threatened by like a police department and an institution where we're meant to receive safety and support from. And another one was the last news station that I was working at was a completely hostile work environment. The CEO of the company actually used to walk around the news station with a gun in his hands, and he used to start drinking after 2 p.m. And just a very interesting man, because he would say all the right things to me and say, you can stay here as long as you want, you're protected, I just want you to thrive and succeed. And on the other hand, also telling me, if you go batshit crazy on the microphones, we're going to shut you off. And giving me those subliminal threats like that, and calling me a fucking hippie and a fucking Democrat and a fucking liberal. And it became a very hostile work environment for me to actually do my job. I ended up quitting that news station, and I think they actually ended up having to close down because they ran out of funds and they didn't pay their employees for 2 months. And I think they're now being investigated. So that was extremely difficult. And I felt like, well, one, my phones were tapped, and, like I was in complete danger if I ever spoke out about what happened inside of that station. And to give you a picture of how bad it was, the employees inside used to call this news station Guantanamo.
Wow.
Because that's how bad it was. So I was able to get out of that. And during that situation, moving into my angels,
I love the contrast.
I know, right? It was like complete darkness, complete hell on earth, because I think everyone that worked there can agree that was hell on earth. That, I don't think it gets any closer to that. That's definitely the most difficult thing I've experienced in my life till this day, and where I've actually felt an actual fearing for my life, a physical threat for my life. I didn't think I was going to come out alive from that station. And I'm here, guys. So I'm very grateful to be here. In 2020, I discovered angels while I was going through divorce, and while I was thinking and considering of quitting the news industry. And I did a course that took 2 years. It was every Thursday for 3 hours, learning on how to call on your angels, how to ask them for favors, how to see the signs, and how to just work with them in general. So technically, I'm an angelic healer, is what you would call it. So, the way in which I started learning to call on my angels is, okay, get me VIP parking spaces everywhere I go. And you start seeing that you are getting VIP parking spaces everywhere you go. Or, give me a clear, undeniable sign that I need to quit the news industry. And that was one sign that was just undeniable. It was beautiful. I was in the middle of San Diego, California, on my surfboard, debating, like, should I quit? Should I not? What did I do the right thing? Like, help me, God. And I was watching the sunset on a surfboard by myself. I had already, started the process of going through the divorce. My husband had actually left the apartment, my ex-husband back then. And I was like, just give me an undeniable sign that I'm doing the right thing and that I'm following a higher purpose here. And 5 minutes later, I see like a good 10 dolphins just jumping probably like 5 feet away from my surfboard and jumping up and down everywhere for like a good 10 minutes. And I just was witnessing the most magical sunset, tears rolling down my face, and these dolphins just giving me a full show on congratulations. Yeah. So that is how I started really learning to work with angels. And my teacher was actually my aunt. Her name is Molina. She's from Colombia, from Medellin. She has a whole school on this with other colleagues. And she has her own holistic center where they do a lot of healing modalities like angelic healing, angelic Reiki, etc. You name it, anything holistic, they do it there. So she was my teacher during that period, and that's how I got initiated with angels and learning how to ask them for signs. And another one of the signs is anytime you see 1111 on clocks, or 333, 444, or wherever you see feathers on the floors, or in spaces where there shouldn't be any feathers, and yeah, that's how I kind of started learning to work with them.
Since I was very little, my mom was always talking about her angels.
Yeah.
And it's not until years later, I mean, we're talking about like a couple years ago, I realized this. I was like, my mom has always been talking about angels. I wonder what that is. I've I've been more of like an introspective kind of person, but spirituality is definitely something that is a lot newer to me.
Okay.
I'm talking about more like 4 years at this point, in which the path of personal growth and spirituality really became clear to me how different they are.
Yeah.
Right? Like personal growth, you're growing personally, individually. Yes, you're learning to know yourself. But spirituality is a whole new level in which you find so much love, support,
Yeah.
and a place to surrender, which I love that word because it's really ultimately what we come to learn here. I'm really into Buddhism. I love all of the teachings from Buddhism, and letting go is ultimately surrendering. And I love that everything that we're speaking to really has to do with that, with letting go. And this week, was it this week? Last week, we had to let go of our plans because we scheduled this conversation to happen last week, and you had something happen
Last minute,
which I would love for you to share. What is it that you were doing? Why did you have to reschedule?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Oh my gosh, this is yet another sign of the way of the heart, you know? And when you get a higher calling, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do, like you will be in that space if you are meant to be and if you listen to your heart. And what ended up happening is we had the interview planned out, and one of my friends called me and was like, Emmy, I can't go to this retreat anymore. I got something scheduled in for work and I cannot miss it. Can you go? And I told her, listen, I would love to. I had already been invited to that retreat like 2 months ago, but it just came down to financially, I can't do it right now. I just can't. And so I told her I can't pay for it. And she was like, okay, well, what if I gift you half of it and you pay me back the other half? And I was like, okay, I think I could do that. Let me figure out if I can call off work because it's now a week before the retreat departs. And so I called off work and they were like, yeah, that's fine, no worries. And everything was super seamless. And so she calls me that same day and she's like, Emmy, I need your passport information, like your license, etc., so I can change my flight to your name. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, we're doing this. So we changed her flight to my name. And after we finished that phone call, I just like broke down crying with her still on the phone while we finished with American Airlines, changing the flight. And I was like, I guess I'm meant to go here. And the retreat was a spiritual retreat to Yellowstone and to Grand Teton. And when I was on the phone with my friend, I told her I'm remembering that 2 years ago, I was listening to this audiobook. It's called El Libro de Oro, Las Enseñanzas de Saint Germain. So the Book of Gold, the teachings of Saint Germain. And in that book, it spoke about Grand Teton and the White Brotherhood. And the White Brotherhood is 12 ascended masters. Amongst them is Jesus, Virgin Mary, Saint Germain, Archangel Michael, Buddha, Kuan Yin, and Mary Magdalene, and others that I don't remember the names of right now. And the book explains that they meet in Grand Teton twice a year to kind of continue developing the plans for the future of humanity and how they're going to support humanity in ascension and awakening. And so I told her this and I was like, oh my gosh, I just remember that when I read that book, my intuition told me and I got the message of, in the near future, not too far away, you will receive the great calling to Grand Teton. And I was like, that's pretty cool. That sounds really important. I want to be there. Yeah, absolutely. Like, okay, that sounds like important work. And that's it. I left it at that, you know, and fast forward 2 years later, this happens. And so I end up getting on a flight a week before the retreat to go to Grand Teton. The interesting thing too is that when I made it to the first airport, I was supposed to fly Florida, Dallas, Salt Lake City to meet up with the whole team or group at Salt Lake City. And then we were going to drive 5 hours towards Yellowstone. Well, I end up my flight gets canceled in Dallas. So I end up having to call American Airlines, trying to figure out how I can get there. They were like, no, we have a flight for tomorrow. That meant I was going to miss a whole day of the retreat. I was going to have to meet them somewhere else. And I was going to like, just miss important work for the retreat. I was like, that doesn't work for me. Please help me out. Like, what is the closest thing that you have to Yellowstone that I can make it to today? And she was like, oh, well, we have a flight to Jackson Hole in the next 2 hours. And so I looked that up and I was like, oh, this is 2 hours away from the Airbnb where they're going to stay. So that's fine. I think I can rent a car and I'll meet them at the Airbnb tonight. That way I don't miss a whole day of the retreat. And so she's like, okay, let me put you on that flight. After I got booked on that flight, my friend calls me and she's like, how did you get on that flight without them charging you? Because Jackson Hole is one of the most expensive airports in the United States. It's where millionaires fly in. And not just that, but it flies over Grand Teton. So you get to see the mountain as you're landing. So I was like, oh my God, stop, shut the F up. Like, seriously. And so the tour guide calls me and she's like, clearly this retreat was for you. Like, we're not going to receive you. The mountain is going to receive you. Yeah. Goosebumps. So I was received by the mountain. And when I landed, I felt like the embrace of the mountain and I felt the presence of all those ascended masters. I felt like I was receiving a lot of downloads and information on what is next, which my human is still trying to figure it out. My soul knows. My soul knows the information. It's been received. I'm just digesting it and integrating it and waiting to kind of figure out what the next steps are. So I ended up renting a car and I started driving through Grand Teton. I had to go through the whole park to get to the Airbnb. So it was like my mission was extremely clear to the point that not only did I get booked on a retreat 1 week before this even happened, but it's like they removed a person from the retreat so that I could go, because otherwise I didn't have the financial means to do it. So it's trusting that intuition and trusting the way of the heart, that when you are so committed to a higher purpose, and to doing good for humankind, you will get these callings by Mother Nature, by ascended masters, to be in spaces where you're going to receive information and codes that will support you and guide you on your mission. And not just that, but that will give you the protection that you need to continue walking that path. And I feel like that's a huge part of what I received in Grand Teton. And it was all my angels working in my favor to get me on that flight, because my concern was I don't have the money for it, so I can't go. But, something bigger wanted me there and figured out the means to get me there. And it was beautiful, beautiful and groundbreaking.
I love every single word that you shared. And I think this really goes back to what we initially started talking about, which is taking action.
Exactly.
Because I feel like we are all tapping into the same type of support by angels or higher self or God or ascender masters, whatever you feel comfortable with. Exactly. But when we take action and we embody that message, when we embody that mission, then we are good vessels, right? Exactly. To be moved by this beautiful guidance. So I think that to me is very important to remind myself of constantly. It doesn't matter how many hours I meditate and I connect with, there are many reasons why we meditate. Right? But if the moments in which I meditate because I want to connect with this realm that I know supports me and guides me, what's good about that if I'm not actually taking action and putting in the work?
Exactly.
I feel like well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. And I am so glad that you were able to go there and to receive all of these beautiful energies and messages and just experiences at the human level, right? Like being there with Mother Nature. We were talking about that before starting to record. When Mother Earth calls, it's like, okay, take me there.
I'm here.
Take me there. And just like Earth, like this planet is just so absolutely beautiful that it's like, okay, please call me more. I mean, we hope that everything works in our favor and like magically things happen for us. If we don't have, like the means, what it's needed in this earth to actually make those things happen and buy the tickets and pay the retreat and all of that. I think, it's in the little things that we can also show how willing we are to be vessels for this mission of ascension and humanity, of expansion, of really following the way of the heart and moving from a very mind-driven culture and programming into one that is connected with the heart, which is, in my opinion, it's really the direct connection that we have with God, with the universe. And anything that comes out of that connection is for the good of all. Exactly. It's not just a personal gain, which I think, going to what I was saying before, we can do that even in the small little things that we do on a daily basis. It doesn't take going to a retreat. It doesn't, like, those are amazing experiences. The
ultimate experience,
right?
But you could do it from your home.
Yeah, but we can do it from our home. So I think there's so many beautiful things that we've talked about today. And is there anything else that you want to share about this journey? Anything that you're feeling your intuition telling you that maybe needs to come out?
I think, one, just thank you for your soul journey as well, and for having the courage to build something and to say, all right, I lived this experience already and it's time for the next thing. And allowing yourself to transform that baby that you built, and that brought you so much joy and so many years, 7 years of your own entrepreneurship and being successful at it is a huge deal. And then allowing yourself to explore a new depth of yourself. Like, thank you for that and for that inner work. And I think, just to add, the inner work doesn't have to be hard or heavy. It could be, you could do it in joy. And it could be easy, relatively easy. We are the ones that make it hard on ourselves sometimes. And it could be fun and enjoyable. And, to give you another tip, like, meditation doesn't have to be sit in silence and if for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. No, meditation can be something as simple as active meditation. I'm grabbing this glass of water and I'm going to drink it and enjoy it and sip it and taste it. And you can do this with your water or with your food, while you're enjoying a meal, like really diving into sitting with yourself, enjoying every single bite, every taste, every dessert, whatever it is you're doing. But you could also do active meditation so that you can stay in full presence. And I think that's where we truly find our power, when we embody the presence and the moment of now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I've told you that I'm a meditation teacher.
No, you didn't tell me that. This is amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm not a meditation teacher. Listen to her. No.
I love everything. I love everything that you said, because it's so true.
Yeah.
And you are talking about mindfulness. You're talking about being present. And throughout the conversation, when you actually said that these intuitions came to you through meditation, I was like, oh, this is amazing, because I don't think we've talked about meditation as the way of the heart, because I do believe that, at least for me, for everyone is different. Everyone is going to have a different path to connect to their heart. To me, it was meditation, 100%. Yeah. So Same. When I heard you say that, I was like, oh, should we go there? But literally in every conversation, I talk about meditation. So I'm like, let's give it a rest.
Yeah.
I do think that because you said this, there's something that I've been telling my family and my friends, but I would love to share with others.
Yeah.
And it's the practice of mindful eating. Because through mindful eating in Buddhism, and then certain, teachings from Buddhism, there's a practice attached or not attached, one of the practices with mindful eating that goes beyond being in the present moment, which is absolutely beautiful and something that we definitely can cultivate more because we're so, we're eating mindlessly, we're eating with the TV on, we're eating with, a bunch of different things that are keeping our attention from what we're actually doing. And in the moment that we're eating, we're really receiving the energy that is supporting this life, this body, which is so important, and we just like give it for granted. But there's another practice that I love with mindful eating, and it's connecting or really inquiring, right? Like in mindful meditation, there's like different stages, and there's concentration, to your point, being in the present moment, allowing calm to permeate your body so that your mind can be calm, your body can be calm, and we regulate our nervous system. And then there's inquiry. So in mindful eating, we can inquire, where is this food coming from?
Yeah.
What took this piece of bread, this egg, this spinach to be in my plate? How many human beings, how many animals, how many elements, all of the things that are involved in the process of having this food in our plate, feeding, fueling our body, and giving us this energy and giving us this life. To me, it has been an incredible practice because not only it has made me aware of the interconnectedness of it all, which is one of the things that I know there's something about your branding that where you talk about unity.
Yeah.
And
community.
Right, community.
We communicate in unity.
Exactly. And I think this is exactly what I've learned. It's really a felt experience when I go through this inquiry. Where did this come from? And then I start to realize that just a little piece of baby lettuce on my plate had to go through so many different stages, so many different people. Without one of them, it maybe couldn't have made it here. Yeah. So the level of connection that we have, that we give for granted, we're too busy. Again, our attention is somewhere else, that we don't realize this. So I just wanted to add that to this because I've been almost every day I've been talking about mindful eating. So for you to bring it here, I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that needs to be shared to more people because it is a beautiful practice. And another byproduct of that is being so much more aware of what is truly fueling my body. I love chips. I love ice cream. I love things like that. But this practice has made me aware from a place, not a place of guilt or shame of like, I shouldn't be having this, but it's truly like, oh, holy cow, this has been processed to the max. Just the awareness has favored, I guess, reaching for the apple, the peach, just because there's something in it that I cannot even explain with words that just feels like it's more, it resonates more. The fruit resonates more with the chips, just because of the awareness of how that has come to be. And I was at the beach the other day, and I'm overextending myself with this, but I love this practice. We're having a
great conversation too, so it's okay.
I love this practice so much. In the most foundational practice of connecting with the food, there's something about eating fruit with that presence and that attention that I absolutely love. I think it was Saturday or Sunday, we were at the beach and I was eating a cherry. Yeah. The beauty that I saw in that cherry, I was like, how is this so beautiful? Like, it looked like it was shimmery. Obviously, the sun was shining on it. All of the pores, the colors. And then I took a bite of that and it was like the juice. It felt like it went through the tips of my toes, the tips of my fingers. I was like, how is this so good? I could literally feel the life force that juice, that tiny little cherry was really feeding me with.
Yeah.
So
I'm feeling it right now, and I'm not even eating the cherry. I feel like you just took me through a whole, like, another level of Pavlov and his dogs. If you guys haven't heard those studies in psychology, but Pavlov and his dogs, they start salivating before he feeds them. It's like literally I just started salivating without even eating the cherry.
Sorry, I should have had cherries here.
It's okay. But yeah, look up that study, you guys. Pavlov and the dogs.
I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, and when you enjoy it and when you, just witness that cherry in full presence and what it does for your body and where it's coming from, the health benefits get amplified because you are literally blessing something that is alive and that is about to go alive into your body to give you all those nutrients. Like, it's so powerful.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up and that, life wanted us to talk about this.
Yes, and the cherry, yes.
And the cherry. Those cherries are having a moment. They're waiting for me in my fridge.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to be enjoying those again tonight, and I'll think of you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
The last thing that I didn't want to miss, and I almost forgot, was how is your relationship with the news today? Like, do you really, you watch the news? Do you read it? How is that relationship? I find that, at least for me, it's such a difficult thing to balance.
Yeah. I have to confess that I hated the news industry after I quit. I was in an inner war with the news industry, and I just hated everything that it stood for and represented. And I finally came to terms with it and to peace with it, right? And essentially the war was within myself and with that part of myself that played a role in the news industry. Today, I don't watch television news. I don't watch local news stations. And there's actually a crisis happening where local news stations are trying to bring more awareness and support to them because the ratings just continue to decrease. And I think part of that is because they don't allow themselves to innovate and to truly communicate in a different way that attracts an audience like ourselves. So I limit my news intake. And what I'll do is I'll occasionally read articles here and there, but I don't stay focused on, for example, when the earthquake was happening in Turkey and stuff like that. It's like I'll read one article or two and that's it. I don't stay on it because energetically and emotional, what that does to your subconscious is extremely draining. So if you could just get the information that you need to receive, to be aware, to understand what's happening in the world, global issues, and then from that space, say, all right, what does the world need from me right now? What can I do to bring more joy to the world? Or what can I do to support the elevation of humanity, because if you really sit and watch the newscast and ask yourself as you're watching it, what is happening inside of me right now? It's extremely powerful to witness how your emotions react, how your physical body reacts in response to that, and your brain too, and how you feel after you watch the newscast. And usually you feel either devastated, powerless, angry, anxious, fearful, whatever it is, but it's all the lowest vibrational emotions. And the lowest vibration and emotion is actually shame and guilt, which we were talking about earlier. So if you can look at the emotions, right, in the scale from Stephen Hawking, he made a whole scale on the emotions, right? So when you understand that that's simply a lower frequency and that the highest frequency is joy, is gratitude, is love, is peace, is unity, then you can start searching for information and knowledge and wisdom that will actually be supportive and allowing you to stay in those vibrations and in those emotions. And it doesn't mean you don't have to feel the other ones, the fear, the shame, the guilt, whatever. No, but it's recognizing that, okay, I'm actually in a state where I'm vibrating very low. So how can I shift out of this? And how can I go back to feeling empowered, feeling joy, feeling love, etc. So I'm very mindful with my relationship with news and how much I intake of that.
Yeah, I think that is very, very important, especially in times like today where when, you know, there's so many things happening in the world that are heartbreaking. And it's not about giving our backs to what's happening, but it is being very aware of, I think the question that you brought here is really important, is how am I contributing to maybe to this conflict too, right?
Exactly.
Am I just a witness of the digital and the online and the TV conflict? And that is giving me somewhat a false idea of I'm contributing to this side or that side because I am constantly consuming the information? Or am I actually taking action into bringing some type of release or relief to those people that are actually experiencing the heartbreak?
Yeah.
I grew up in Colombia up until I was 16 years old, and my family still lives there, and I go visit a lot. And one of the last times I went, I was at my parents' house and the news were on.
Yeah.
I called an Uber, and I get in the Uber and the news are on. I'm going to the doctor's office. I get to the doctor's office and the TV at the news are on. I'm walking out of the office, and the little store, the grocery store in the corner, the news are on, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
This is heavy, and I am someone that is really sensitive to that. So to me, it's always been a struggle to, how do I find the balance? How do I stay informed? How can I contribute? How can I do any good? How can I bring any good to the world? And ultimately, this podcast is my contribution.
Exactly.
And taking action into watering the seeds of love, compassion, connection, to me is the way that I can do it most efficiently, at least. And I think that's going to look different for every single person, but it is a really important question to ask. Every single one of us should be asking that question. How can I contribute? How can I really bring something good out of this pain and bring joy, like you said?
Yeah.
I think this is a beautiful way to wrap it up with the 3 questions that I am asking everyone. You answered one already.
Okay.
But I'm still going to, I think most of them actually, now that I think about it. So one of the things that I usually ask is, how do you think, usually I've been talking about practices, but I think for you is like using your voice. How do you think that is tapping into the wisdom of the heart? And I think that's, very clear, but I would love to hear your answer.
So using my voice, and how is that tapping into the wisdom of the heart? I think for me, it comes down to vulnerability and how vulnerable I can get in these interviews. Even if it means like I'm literally undressing my soul in front of you, and I'm undressing my heart to show you this very vulnerable side of me that not everyone gets to see. For example, like meditating outside in my backyard naked, but sharing that vulnerability so that you can see, one, the full spectrum of myself and the full spectrum of my voice, right? Which can shift. Like I can sing some songs and I can sing in a different tone, and I can speak in one tone and I can speak in another tone. Like my journalist voice is very different than my current voice. Like I could do a newscast voice right now and it'll sound something like, muy buenas tardes, los saluda Emiliana Molina, bienvenidos a su noticiero de Washington. El día de hoy el presidente estadounidense Donald Trump estaba abogando por whatever it is, but like my tone completely changed, right? And it's like, that's part of the full spectrum of who I am. Like that voice is a part of me. So I tap into it by playing around with my voice a lot. And I allow myself to sing all kinds of music, even indigenous tribe songs that I've been learning a lot from. And I allow myself to just get really vulnerable in interviews, and hoping that my own personal journey and my own stories can bring tools to support you in your own growth or your own personal story. Vulnerability is so important.
Thank you for sharing the rainbow of your voice with us, because it really is just beautiful. And it was amazing to just see you switch from like this very peaceful and harmonious, you know, like essence to on it.
Breaking news voice.
And I'm
like
receiving it. I'm receiving those news. I'm like, okay, I'm paying attention.
Yeah. It's like the chaos, the tension, the like authoritative voice. Yeah. It's so different. And like the beauty about that is that like I give myself full permission to be all of myself, to explore all of myself. That is where we really find sovereignty and freedom. You know,
that's a whole podcast that we could talk about. The other question is, what do you think the world needs the most right now?
I think joy. Yeah, I think joy. And I've been playing around a lot. Actually, in Grand Teton, this question came to me like, how can I make one person happy today? And so I asked myself that question and I just let it go, you know? And there's so much beauty in asking yourself questions every single day, because the universe delivers and gives you the answers. And then I ended up finding myself in situations where I was making people happy without realizing that I was making them happy, until they expressed like, you saved me. Oh my God, thank you. You know, like one example is we slept in a teepee and it was so cold because we were in front of the mountain. Temperatures were really low, and a teepee is like a big indigenous tent. And we barely had any covers. And I was with an older woman sleeping in the teepee as well. And she was like, my feet are freezing. I can't sleep like this. And I had the warm pouches that when you put them on the air, they warm up. And I only had 2 of them. And I was like, all right, let me just give her one, because she's probably not going to sleep. And I'm okay. I can handle this. So I kept one and I gave her one. And I put them on her feet and I gave her extra socks as well. And she went to sleep. And the next day she was like, you saved me. I was able to sleep because you gave me that. Thank you so much. And it's like, there's so much joy that comes from gifting people happiness and joy. You know, like if you gift people anger and rage and road rage, that's probably what you're going to receive. And it's not going to be a pleasant day for you at all. And if you gift people joy and happiness, that's probably what you're going to receive as well. And it can be such a pleasant and good day. So you get to choose. You get to decide what you want to gift yourself and others.
I love that. And I think that is exactly what we were talking about before, that yes, this did happen in a retreat, but you can recreate this type of interactions with human beings in any place where you can find a human being. So that can happen anywhere.
Exactly.
The last question is, what do you think love is?
Oh my gosh, I've never been asked that before. That's such a beautiful question. What do I think love is? You know, I think I've been able to get glimpses of different kinds of love throughout my life. And I think it can come in different shapes and boxes. I think for me right now in this stage of my life, feeling love is like feeling safe in someone's presence. Feeling like you can speak just about anything without feeling judged. And like you can have deep, vulnerable conversations without the fear of not being loved for your thought process or for your actions, but like just being witnessed in full presence and appreciation and gratitude for your soul journey. Because at the end of the day, I feel like we all came here to experience love and to experience joy. So for me, it comes down to feeling a lot of safety in all of my relationships. I think that's a good start for feeling love. Like this, right now, this space feels so loving and so safe. And your presence and your inner journey and what you emanate has allowed me to share my vulnerabilities and undress my soul for your audience to hear the story. You know, I shared very intimate parts of myself. So thank you, Nat, for holding such beautiful space for this conversation.
Thank you so, so much for sharing yourself so abundantly, so vulnerable. I think that I could talk to you for the rest of the day. So hopefully we have another conversation at some point.
Absolutely.
And where can people find you? Is there anything that you want to talk about that you're doing or that you're offering, or just simply where can people find you in case they want to know more about you?
Yeah, you can find me on The Awakened Journalist. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, most likely all platforms. I'm also on YouTube. And you can find me on Instagram as The Awakened Journalist, or Emiliana Molina Fajardo is my personal Instagram as well. And what I'm doing, I also do TV coaching, on-camera coaching. I used to do angelic healing. I don't do it as much anymore, but I mainly practice it on myself, but I integrate both worlds. So through my camera coaching, I actually work with angels so that you can get past fears of feeling seen and heard authentically as you are. Yeah, and I work for a private company right now that's actually what's supporting me make ends meet financially, and I do communications for them. So that's my life right now.
I'm sure that after this connection that you had in your retreat, you'll find more guidance. I'm sure you'll find the answers for this stage of your life in which you know that something is coming.
Yeah.
What we were talking about, you know something's coming. I'm not quite sure what.
Exactly.
I'm here to see you in the process and to be a witness of your growth and your expansion and your ascension. So I would love to stay in contact, and thank you so much for sharing yourself and your voice today with everyone.
Thank you, Nat. Thank you for this space.
As usual in this episode, I really wanted to expand in so many different topics that we covered. But this always makes me more excited about future conversations, because when I first reach out to my guests, I have an idea of the topics that we are going to be talking about. And then when the conversation happens, it's kind of like an explosion of all the things that could be explored, that it really just makes me excited to have future conversations. I really found this conversation so rich and so many things to really reflect on. I really hope that you found this conversation informative or inspiring. And again, if there's anything that you think and believe that someone will benefit from this conversation, please share with others. If you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear from you. So please use the comment section of any of the platforms where you're streaming this podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.